The ultimate test of man's conscience may be his willingness to sacrifice something today for future generations whose words of thanks will not be heard. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and fellow enthusiasts of biodiversity conservation, a very good morning to each one of you. As we gather here today for the commencement of our 17th International Conference on Biodiversity Conservation, Global Strategies and Legal Scenarios put forth by Kerala Law Academy Law College in association with Center for Advanced Legal Studies and Research and KLA Center for Environment Science and Law and IQAC KLA.
As we embark on this intellectual journey, I extend a hearty welcome to the esteemed management, our treasured invitees, reverend teachers, and all our dedicated attendees. Your presence adds a special sheen to this auspicious occasion. Founded in 1966 by the legal luminary late Dr. N. Narayanan Nair, Sir, Kerala Law Academy has since stood as a beacon of excellence in the field of legal education. It is a place where relentless pursuit of perfection in academics, consultancy, research, and pioneering legal reforms is a way of life. Our institution is committed to providing students with a stimulating environment, nurturing their talents and skills through various national and international events of prominence. Before we officially inaugurate this conference, let us take a moment of silence to honor the memory of our beloved late Dr. N. Narayanan Nair, Sir. Thank you all for your respect and remembrance. The quote by Marley Martin, "The earth does not belong to us, we belong to the earth," encapsulates the core ethos of this seminar. It serves as a profound reminder of our responsibility as custodians of our planet. Our seminar is dedicated to biodiversity conservation with a focus on global strategies, legal scenarios, environmental policies, and threats to biodiversity, and the vital role it plays in natural protected areas. Today, we're truly honored to have several distinguished personalities joining us virtually on this platform.
The greatest leader is not necessarily the one who does the greatest things. They are the one that gets the people to do the greatest things. These are the words of Ronald Reagan. This statement rings particularly true for us today. With that, it's my privilege to introduce Dr. Dakshina Saraswati Ma'am, Assistant Professor, Kerala Law Academy, whose unending support and enthusiasm goes a long way in making this event a reality. With utmost respect and gratitude, I invite Dr. Dakshina Saraswati Ma'am to officially welcome our distinguished guests to this inaugural session. Ma'am, please.
Thank you, Gauri. Most respected Dr. N.K. Jayakumar Sir, Dr. Bismi Gopalakrishnan Ma'am, Dr. Stephanie, Attorney at Law, Bhagya Dilkrishi Vikramasinghe, Advocate Nagaraj Narayan Sir, Professor K. Anil Kumar Sir, other distinguished invitees, resource persons, participants, faculty members, students, parents, non-teaching, administrative, and technical staff, and also all the well-wishers of this college. With great pride and a matter of joy, I take this privilege to welcome all the legal dignitaries and prominent personalities who have virtually gathered here for the inaugural function for the 17th International Seminar on Biodiversity Conservation, Global Strategies and Legal Scenarios, hosted by Kerala Law Academy Law College, Thiruvananthapuram, in association with KALSA, KLA Center for Environmental Science and Law, and IQAC. This seminar aims to focus on the biodiversity conservation, its global strategies and legal scenarios, environmental policies, threats to biodiversity, and role and importance of biodiversity conservation in protected natural areas. Moreover, this seminar provides a premier interdisciplinary platform for researchers and practitioners and educators to present and discuss the most recent innovations, trends and concerns, as well as practical challenges encountered and solutions adopted in the field biodiversity conservation. It's an honor to introduce our distinguished guest whose expertise and insights will undoubtedly enrich our understanding of the subject matter. This seminar is proudly inaugurated by the prominent personality, Professor Dr. N.K. Jayakumar sir, former Vice Chancellor, NUALS Kochi. He served as Secretary, Kerala Legislative Assembly, Advisor to Chief Minister of Kerala. Dr. Jayakumar sir's contributions as a professor, head, dean, faculty of law at the University of Kerala have significantly shaped legal education and research. His absolute candor, sincerity, dedication, and commitment made him a living legend and a luminary in the education, legal, and academic sphere. Sir is an exemplary Indian law educator, an eminent jurist, and also a recipient of Mannat Krishnamenon Medal. Sir has always been a constant source of motivation and have paved ways for all of us to work hard and stay focused towards our goals. He is always there to extend a helping hand to all activities of Kerala Law Academy. On behalf of Kerala Law Academy Law College and everyone present here, I extend a warm welcome to you, sir. The inaugural function is presided over by Professor Dr. Bismi Gopalakrishnan, Professor of Law, Director of Research, Mahatma Gandhi University. Today, with immense respect, privilege, and gratitude, I would like to invite our resource person, an epitome of knowledge and a lady of noble personality. Her specialization is in healthcare laws, intellectual property rights, and public law. She is a recipient of National Merit Scholarship and also recipient of Kerala University Merit Scholarship. She has international fellowships such as Alumni United States Department of State, Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, International Visit Leadership Program. She has a number of books to her credits and is an eminent academician with commendable accomplishments to her credit. Above all this, she will be apt to say that she is one among the KLA fraternity. This is evident from the way she associates herself with all the programs conducted by Kerala Law Academy. She readily accepted our invitation to be part of this ambitious venture in spite of her busy schedule. We are indeed indebted to you, ma'am, for this. Her insights into the field of law are indeed invaluable to our seminar. On behalf of Kerala Law Academy Law College and everyone present here, I warmly welcome you, ma'am. It's an immense pleasure to have the presence of Dr. Stephanie Roffling Dijox, a distinguished scholar with dual expertise in German and French law. As a professor at the University of Paris in Ontario, she plays a pivotal role in shaping legal education and fostering international collaboration, making her a true asset to our academic community. Her research and teaching interests include competition law, commercial law, and intellectual property law. She holds innumerable publications to her credit, including a book on developing inter-regional exchanges through the abolition of commercial and tariff barriers, myth or reality. She will be delivering the keynote address today. Ma'am, your presence adds another layer of expertise to our seminar, and we eagerly anticipate your contributions, ma'am. On behalf of Kerala Law Academy Law College and everyone present here, I warmly welcome you, ma'am. We have the distinct honor of introducing a prominent figure of Sri Lanka, Srimati Bhagya Dilkrishi Vilkramasinghe, Attorney at Law, Supreme Court of Sri Lanka. Her dedication to public service and her unwavering commitment to addressing corruption issues are indeed commendable. Ma'am has specialized in environmental law and policy at University College London and had experience as a lecturer in law and a researcher in environmental law and climate change. Ma'am will be delivering the special address here. On behalf of Kerala Law Academy Law College and everyone present here, we heartfully welcomes you, ma'am. With immense respect, I would like to extend my welcome to Advocate Nagaraj Narayan Sir, Director, Kerala Law Academy, and Advocate High Court of Kerala, Member Bar Council of Kerala, who's my teacher and always a fountain of constant support to all the activities in this college. He's a highly efficient teacher, excellent administrator, and always kept himself updated with the new changes in the legal education field. His knowledge and eminence is indeed commendable. He is the heart and soul of KLA. On behalf of KLA, teachers, non-teachers, and on my own behalf, I welcome you, sir. I take this opportunity to welcome Professor K. Anil Kumar Sir, Director, Administration, Students and Faculty Affairs, Kerala Law Academy. His skills and expertise in the administration is a paragon that we aspire and look up to. He is the chief architect when it comes to all the activities, programs, competitions conducted in this institution. I cordially welcome Professor Anil Kumar K. Sir to this function. Professor Harindran Kesa, Principal, Kerala Law Academy. He is always a source of inspiration to all the academic activities in this college. He takes ample care in expressing his appreciation for even the slightest of the achievements we attained. I am extremely thankful to you, sir, for rendering support on behalf of Kerala Law Academy, teachers, students, non-teaching members, and on my own behalf. I welcome you, sir, from the bottom of my heart. Professor Anil Kumar Ji, sir, Vice Principal, Kerala Law Academy, having more than 26 years of experience in this teaching profession. He is active in every academic and other activities which are carried out in this institution. I welcome you, sir, to this event. Professor Dr. Ajita Nair L., a senior faculty member. She needs no introduction as she is part of KLA family for more than 18 years. She is active in every academic and other activities which are carried out in this institution. I wholeheartedly welcome you, ma'am. I would like to welcome Srimati Darshana S. Thambi, a research scholar, for her valuable presence and one of the faculty conveners of this event. She'll be rendering the vote of thanks in this session. She's a young, vibrant member in all the academic and other activities conducted by the institution. I wholeheartedly welcome you, ma'am. Now, I take this opportunity to welcome all other faculty conveners, Srimati Prajita PG, Sri Varsha Ji Nair, Assistant Professors of KLA, and also welcome the student conveners Arya MA, Roshni S, Lakshmi Ramesh, Megha ML, Alfia, Mary Alina, and Lakshmi Sadish, and also welcome the student moderators Hanan and Gauri Jodish, who are anchoring in a gentle and classical manner in this function. Last but not the least, I would welcome all the distinguished invitees, resource persons, participants, faculty members, students, parents, non-teaching, administrative and technical staff, and also all the well-wishers of this college. Thank you once again.
Thank you, ma'am, for your warm welcome. I also extend a heartfelt thank you. Welcome to you, ma'am.
Today we're graced by the presence of an eminent personality and a distinguished academician, Professor Dr. Bismi Gopalakrishnan, who currently holds the position of Professor of Law and serves as the Director of Research at Mahatma Gandhi University, Kottayam. With an impressive teaching career spanning over 22 years, Dr. Bismi has authored more than 40 research articles and has been a distinguished speaker at over 30 international seminars and 18 national seminars. Additionally, Dr. Bismi is also an integral member of the IQAC at the MGU. With immense pleasure, I invite you, ma'am, for the presidential address of this session. Ma'am, please.
Most respected Professor Dr. N.K. Jayakumar sir, Dr. Stephanie Roffling, Srimati Bhagya Dilrukshi Vikram Singhe, Dr. Dakshina Saraswati, all the esteemed faculties of Kerala Law Academy, research scholars, students, and teaching and non-teaching faculty of Kerala Law Academy Law College. So happy to be associated so happy to be associated with you in this international seminar, and that to a very interesting, most relevant area, that is conservation of biodiversity. I will just a very small presentation to make. I've already shared the slides, so do you want me to share the slides, whatever it is convenient? Shall I share the slides?
Yeah, ma'am, sure.
Now, are you sharing, or do you want me to share?
It's already shared, ma'am. Bismi ma'am, PPT is already shared.
Sorry for that technical issue. So I think I'm audible.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. So basically, this area is one of the most important areas as far as all of us are concerned, because currently we are talking about the basic One Health, One World concept. So biodiversity is basically, when we try to define biodiversity, it is the variety of living species that forms an essential part of the ecosystem. So the loss of biodiversity due to our activities have made human civilization think of ways of reducing rather than controlling the losses. You can just move on to the next slide. So the term biological diversity, actually it was being first used by J. Arthur Harris in the book The Variable Desert in 1916. And the term natural diversity was applied by the science division of the nature conservation body in a study, that is the preservation of the natural diversity in 1975. But actually, it was in 1980 that the term biological diversity was introduced to the scientific community by Thomas Lovejoy. And W.J. Rawson specifically used the term biodiversity in 1985. So you can just move on. And the conservation of global biodiversity is a very recent phenomenon, but conservation of natural resources has a very long existence. So ethics of resource conservation gained popularity due to the direct relation with nature and we human beings. And the social dilemma that is associated with the natural resource management was popularly known as tragedy of the commons. Just move on. And there are evidence of principles of the conservation biologist from which the communal resource ethics can be traced. So we have many illustrations where the indigenous people had to pay for all these destructions that we were creating to the natural resources. So we had a group of people who were trying to save the biodiversity, and especially the clan leaders, they were aware of the minute details of the rivers, the streams, and how to manage all this. And there were several instances around us which speaks of the rurals, the rituals, the structured practices, which are so closely associated with our biodiversity. So the next slide. So the conservation ethics, it was there even in the religious works, like the philosophic writings in the Shinto, in the Hinduism, in Islam, in Tao, and the Buddhism. And even Plato wrote about pastoral and degradation in the Greek philosophy. In Bible, we have traces in, that is especially Moses, talking about that every 7th year the land should be left uncultivated. And in 8680, the wildlife sanctuary was being founded by in the Fame Islands as a response to this religious belief. So moving on to the next slide. So natural history became very popular by the 18th century, and by the 1900 in Germany, we have the 150 natural history museums, and Britain had 250, and US have 250, and France had 300. So preservation as well as conservation-based sentiments was being developed throughout the 19th century. And we can just move on to the next slide. So in the 19th century, you have the biogeography concepts also coming into forefront. So, and there arose a concern to collect the specimens of rare species before they just get extinct due to some collections by the collections by the collectors. So the next slide. So the modern conservation movements of their roots in the late 18th century, particularly in the England and the Scotland thinkers who attempted to give the need for preserving nature. And definitely, you can just move on to the next slide. So the process of all these, the ideological process did have an impact in India also, because in British India, the Indian forest was based on the conservation of Indian forests. Indian biodiversity was based on 3 core principles. That is, environment was damaged due to human activities. So it is civic duty to maintain the environment, and scientific methods must be used to ensure that this duty is carried out. And it was James Martin who promoted the above ideology by publishing the method topographical reports and lobbied for institutionalizing the forest conservation activities, and also established in India the forest departments to prevent the scale of deforestation that was taking place. So you can just move on to the next slide. So conservation also becomes very popular in India, and we understood the value of the natural resources like timber, the fishes, the topsoil, the pastures, etc. And we started the first Seabirds Preservation Act of 1869, and the first ever conservation legislation that was passed after the huge demands from the Association for the Protection of and just move on to the next slide. So the great loss of global diversity gained international concerns. And for the first time, you find that the international undertaking in the form of plant genetic resources, which was initiated by FAO. And the universally accepted arrangement in 1983 spoke on behalf of the principle that the plant genetic resources are the heritages of mankind, for which they shall be available for human purposes without any restrictions. So the plant biological reserves of economic and social interest would be available for preservation, evaluation, and plant breeding. And you can just move on the slides. So based on this, you can have the ad hoc working groups in 1990, which harmonized the early international the conventions on the international conventions on biological diversity. You can just move on the slides. So commercialization of biological reserves, bioresources is concerned. Just move the slides. So no such law has been passed with convention. Next slide. Into force on December 29th, conservation and sustainable use of biological diversity, and also provides for regulating other activities related to the biological reserves as its main objectives. The next slide, please. So the CBD provides for equitable sharing of benefits that are derived from the commercial utilization of biological resources. So actually, you have a great initiative for regulating the commercial sector, which involves the resources. Next slide. So just quickly moving to the Indian history of conservation. Next slide. We have a rich history as rich Indian tradition as turned right from the Smritis. We have the Yajnavalkya Smriti, a text written before the 4th, 5th century AD, which provides punishments for cutting down trees and thereby discouraging such activities. It is also found that the forest department existed during the reign of that was led by, and that forest department was the Arthashastra of Kautilya mentioned that these forest superintendents and the forest guards had the responsibility of classifying the herbs, the trees, and other species found in forests, and then pricing them along with punishing those who cut down the trees. Next slide. So, and the Arthashastra also give evidence of value addition to bioresources and biodiversity. Even in the Mauryan period, we have emphasis that was being laid down upon the need for forest administration. Ashoka's pillar edicts give an expression about Ashoka's views for welfare of the environment as well as for biodiversity. So the legal history, we have a vibrant legal history starting, you can just move on the slides, starting from the Indian Forest Act of 1865, the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, the Forest Conservation Act of 1980, the Environmental Protection Act of 1986, the BD Act of 2002. You can just move the slides. And now where do we stand? That's the most important question. Where do we stand as far as biodiversity is concerned? You can just move on the slides. So still, do we have that, the policy intervention? You can just move on. Do you have that policy intervention? And just move on. So whether the policy intervention plus the institutional frameworks that gives the sustainable development? Do we still harper upon that particular concept of sustainable development, or are we deviating from this particular path? Are we deviating from the traditional legal history? Are we moving from the legacy that we often took pride of? So the next slide. So we have the Biological Diversity Amendment Bill of 2021 and the Forest Conservation Amendment Bill of 2023 in the Lok Sabha, and which has been passed recently in the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Now, the move have watered down the regulatory powers contained in the parent laws, that is the Biological Diversity Act of 2002 and the Forest Conservation Act of 1980. The next slide. So the implications, what are the implications of this amendment? What are the implications of these amendments in India's socio-economic and ecological securities? Actually, it is next slide. Because now if we just analyze the next slide. If we just analyze the implications of the socio-economic and ecological securities, we find that we are trekking into a very serious problem. Now, this picture, it is a forest path in the Niyamagiri Hills in Odisha. The Dongria Kond people of this region have been fighting a long battle against Vedanta's plan to mine the hills for bauxite. This is the picture from Hindu, August 5, 2023. So now, what are the consequences of the Biodiversity Bill, the Amendment Act? What are the specific provisions that is contained? First, the criminal prosecution of violators has been done away with. The National Biodiversity Authority, which was originally established as an autonomous regulator, it is now a body consisting of 16 central government officials and 4 officials from state biodiversity boards, so ending the possibility of its functioning independently. Then we also have the terms like benefit claimers, non-specification, codified traditional knowledge, which are terms which repeatedly implement the access and benefit sharing protocol. We have also exempted the Irish practitioners from complying with the law, that is mere window dressing in the regulatory schema. So the next slide. And what about the Forest Conservation Act, the amendment that has been brought about? Next slide. So the Forest Conservation Act will no longer appear to the forest land, which are functional forests as per the dictionary meaning of the term. With this, the conservation bill that is being launched, next slide, the act will only apply to land notified as forest under the Indian Forest Act, or those that have been officially recorded as a forest on or after October 25, 1980. Next slide. So the bill, however, claims that it clarifies the scope of applicability of the Act upon various lands so as to remove ambiguities and bring clarity. But this objective, the objective that is stated in the bill, does not have any correlation with the Forest Conservation Amendment Bill that has been brought about. Because next slide. That means because the Forest Conservation Act that has been brought about removes the protection of government judgment in 1980. Dire implication is that we are nation's forest to urban infrastructure development, and tribal people and other forest dwelling communities in such regions from securing their rights under the Forest Rights Act of 2006. Again, it opened up all the forest areas 100 kilometers from the borders or the line of control or line of actual control for strategic project of national importance and concerning national security, with serious implications to the rights of communities who live there, especially in the northeastern region and the trans-Himalayan region, desert ecosystems, coastal areas, and the islands. It also allows for fairly large permanent security establishments to come up in the forest areas. So it allows zoos and ecotourism projects to come up as forest activities. Next slide. So the quick implications. Now, what if we apply these bills to Vedanta? Now, if these rules are was applied a decade ago, the next slide. If we had applied these rules a decade ago, Vedanta could have seamlessly secured approvals for mining bauxite in Niyamagiri, and particularly the vulnerable Dangriya Kaunts tribes would have been displaced and dispersed. Now, their sacred forests would have been devastated, and the communities would have been reduced to a miserable state, which definitely several other tribes in different parts of the world are facing. Next slide. And again, there are also next slide. There are also plans for putting up a zoo safari in 10,000 acres in Arvali range in Gurgaon and Nuh districts of Haryana. So constructions that will take, imagine, constructions that too in part of Aravali's region. Aravali Safari project will result in unnecessary real estate development that will destroy the native ecosystem of Aravali by clearing trees, undergrowth, vegetation, grasses, and other such niche habitats used by the residents' wildlife. So next slide. Here I'm ending. Well, then these laws which is already been passed, that is, and they too, the next slide, they have a new name also, the Van Samrakshan Adhyan 1980. Will these, will the Forest Conservation Bill and the Biodiversity Bill, will it make environmental laws purely ornamental and all clearance procedural mere formalities? So next slide, and here I end. So remembering that it is the right over our genetic resources, right over our traditional knowledge, right to self-governance by respecting their customary laws and community protocols, and right to benefit from third parties who utilizes their genetic resources and traditional knowledge, with due respect to all the local community rights, with due respect to benefit sharing, with due respect to the preservation, with due respect to one health and one health and one world for all of us, eagerly waiting to hear the inaugural address and the special address. Thank you. Thank you, KLA fraternity, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your words of wisdom.
Next, we are truly honored to have the distinguished presence of Professor Dr. N.K. Jayakumar sir. He is a former Vice Chancellor of New Als Kochi, a professor, Head and Dean at Faculty of Law, University of Kerala, as well as the Secretary of Kerala Legislative Assembly. Additionally, he holds the prestigious title of National Fellow from the Indian Council of Social Science Research and currently serves as an advisor to the Chief Minister of Kerala. Notably, Professor Jayakumar sir has also authored 11 books, numerous research articles, and articles addressing contemporary issues. I'm extremely grateful to invite Professor Dr. N.K. Jayakumar sir for the inaugural address. Sir, please.
Professor Bismi, who chairs this session. Respected resource persons who are delivering keynote addresses and special addresses, faculty and students of Kerala Law Academy, researchers, student and faculty conveners of this program, friends. I must thank Dakshina for the kind words of introduction. I must say that I am greatly honored by the opportunity to deliver the inaugural lectures at this international seminar. I must confess at the outset that my knowledge of biodiversity conservation is not substantial. Of course, when you don't know anything about a subject, you can speak on for hours, saying all irrelevant things, but I don't want to commit that fault. Anyway, my task was considerably reduced by this man. He has practically touched every aspect of biodiversity conservation. And he has flagged probably every critical issue that will be discussed threadbare in the coming sessions of the seminar. I will make only a few observations which appear to be of crucial importance when I thought about this subject. India's role in biodiversity conservation is rather unique because our tradition, our civilization, I must say, has accepted the intrinsic right of nature to exist. Nature itself is personified. And probably every living organism is having some form of divinity in our culture. Please don't misunderstand me that I don't subscribe to the view that plastic surgery existed in India long back, or civil aviation was very much there during the time of Sri Ram and Ravana. Those are all myths, part of mythology. But this inbuilt recognition of nature and personification of nature was something very much in existence in our custom and tradition, which explains the unique place that is assigned to the conservation of nature. Conservation of nature means conservation of biodiversity. And the threats that have been raised subsequently, because development will have a heavy toll to play. They're all for development. But when development takes place, we have to pay a heavy price for that. For example, take urbanization. I have seen a recent study, a report, which is known as the State of India's Birds. And the report categorically states that 60% of the bird species that were assessed for identifying trends showed a decline. What is the importance of this? Birds are considered to be excellent indicators of the health of the planet. So you study the bird population, the trends in the existence of birds over a period of time. You get a clear picture, a reliable picture of the health of the earth, the planet. So that is just an example I mentioned. Now, Professor Bismi was telling us in detail about the Convention on Biodiversity. Here again, as far as India is concerned, I would say that conservation of biodiversity is not just a matter of legal concern or policy concern. There are ethical, economic, social, and cultural aspects of biodiversity which cannot really be separated. So, what are the means we adopt for addressing the problems of biodiversity? Really are very complex, very complicated. When the Convention on Biodiversity was adopted internationally, India also put its signature, ratified the convention, and there was also some follow-up action, I must say. I think in 1994, the convention was ratified by India. And in 2002, the Biological Diversity Act was enacted in our country. But for India as well as for other developing countries, I am happy that there are several participants from other countries, especially developing countries like Sri Lanka here. The question is, how do we prioritize? Biodiversity conservation is a very important goal, which we cannot neglect. Economic and social development is an equally necessary goal. Poverty eradication is one of the overriding priorities of not only India, but every developing country. How do you reconcile these apparently conflicting goals? This is perhaps the most basic problem confronted by our policymakers, our lawmakers. The answers, all the answers cannot be found out in law. All the answers cannot be provided by the legal system or the administrative system. But there are many things which can depend on inputs from the legal system. But there are others where inputs must come from elsewhere, not from the legal system. Now, the Montreal Global Diversity Framework has projected a target to set nature on a path of recovery by the year 2030. 2030 is not far away. We are now in 2023. So within the next 7 years, 6 to 7 years, what can we realistically hope to achieve? Probably this is one of the themes that this international seminar must examine. Now, another problem that arises and which can considerably deserves the attention of academics, especially legal academics, is how do we reconcile human rights with conservation of biodiversity? And in that area, what are the threats faced by biodiversity conservation? As you know, India is a mega biodiversity country, one of the 12 biodiversity hotspots. India is home to many diverse ecosystems, species, and genes as well as diverse cultures. This is one peculiar feature of the country which we shall not lose sight of. Because our diversity is not only in bioresources, but our diversity is much deeper. We have 4,635 distinct ethnic communities, 325 languages belonging to 12 language families, 6 major religions, and dozens of smaller independent faiths, 3 racially distinct resident populations, ways of life ranging from ancient hunter-gatherer to modern urbanism. Imagine, see, this diversity is unthinkable, unimaginable as far as people from other countries are concerned. How do we preserve this diversity? So here we go beyond biodiversity conservation and reach a point where the cultural diversity that is inbuilt as far as our system is concerned needs to be preserved. Biodiversity conservation becomes a part of that larger process. So for us, biodiversity is about conserving the diverse culture that defines the nation. Now, a few words about Convention on Biological Diversities appears to be relevant to this discussion. Convention on Biological Diversity is primarily viewed as a means to conserve and to make sustainable use of biological resources in our countries of the world, developed as well as developing. There are developing countries which are rich in resources and developed countries which are eager, which are hungry to appropriate these bioresources for their own benefit, their own corporates. This presents a kind of conflict between the values enshrined in the Convention on Biological Diversity on the one hand, and the values which are accepted, which are enshrined in the WPO TRIPS agreements, where intellectual property rights, which are individual, personal, private property rights. As far as the rights which are recognized in the Convention on Biological Diversity are collective rights. They belong to the community, they belong to everybody, they belong to the people. How do we reconcile this conflict? The conflict which arises from treating intellectual property rights as personal, private property rights, and the need of the whole mankind to preserve biological diversity. Even while I am speaking, outside my room, heavy rains are happening. This is September, end of September. Normally, we never have rains in the month of September. September is supposed to be a warm, sunny month. 5 years back, in 2018, Kerala had unprecedented floods. And incidentally, this 2018 floods became the focus of a movie, Malayalam movie, which is going to be the official entry of India, the Oscar. This year also we have something like that in Kerala. Unprecedented heavy rains in the month of September, which is playing havoc with our agricultural practices, our expectations, which may eventually generate so many unforeseen problems, this climate change. So this is not a nightmare, but the acute problems that may be thrown up by damaged biodiversity. We are all the victims of that. We cannot remain complacent when depletion of biological diversity takes place in our country or in the world as a whole. So this is not a subject which has only academic significance or relevance. This is something which affects you and me. This is something which affects each and every person. Whether you are in the United States or whether you are in India, or whether you are in Sri Lanka or France. These problems are common to mankind. And we have to discuss these problems together. Of course, the focus may slightly shift. India's problems may not be the same as the problems faced by a European country or America. So, international discourses, intellectual exercises on the challenges of biodiversity conservation and the global strategies which have to be designed to meet these challenges assumes great significance. An institution like the Kerala Law Academy is very much suited to undertake this academic exercise and bring together people who are knowledgeable as well as people who are concerned about the future of our planet. Bismi in her presidential address was mentioning some recent amendments. Amendments have been made in the Mineral Development and Regulation Act. Amendments have been made in the Biological Diversity Act of 2002, the Forest Conservation Act, and maybe some other enactments. Of course, I do not want to go into the details of all these amendments, but to sum up, I can definitely say that these amendments contribute to further depletion of biological resources and further weakens our legal and administrative machinery to support the conservation of biodiversity. There is a movement spearheaded by developing countries of the world for commoditization and privatization of biodiversity resources. The most convenient and effective tool for this purpose is furnished by intellectual property rights. There is some review mechanism in TRIPS, which students of IPR may be familiar. But so far, these review mechanisms have proved to be ineffective. They have never been to the rescue of developing countries. So what happens is, as a result of TRIPS, there is no international recognition and enforceability of private patents for microorganisms. Patent for life itself is possible. This will ultimately legitimize the piracy of indigenous biodiversity, which we call biopiracy. Biopiracy is legalized. Biopiracy is granted legal recognition, which will definitely affect the resources, biodiversity related knowledge of indigenous local communities in developing countries. So we can definitely say that these provisions are antithetical to India's cultural as well as economic laws. They disenfranchise local communities and contradict the biodiversity rights recognized in the Convention on Biological Diversity. So there is apparently a conflict between what the IPR provide to TRIPS and the provisions in the Convention on Biological Diversity. So how do we make them compatible with provisions of CBD, Convention on Biological Diversity, and also human rights? Human rights is a much more basic concern and anchored in documents like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Governance and Convention. And how do we keep alive the concept of sustainable development? Sustainable development necessarily means conservation of biological diversity. How do we keep alive a very pertinent concept like intergenerational equity? The duty that is imposed, the obligation that is imposed on the present generation to look after the interests of the future generations, our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. Only because our earlier generations, our forefathers, were considerate. And they retained so many things. They sacrifice their own interests so that the coming generations will also live comfortably, live peacefully, live happily. But the moment human beings began to be greedy, selfish. The idea of intergenerational equity was totally lost. So this is the time when we are discussing things like biodiversity conservation to pause and think a little about intergenerational equity. The problem with the Convention on Biodiversity is that it's a weak agreement. I would say it is a soft stage of development. You must have heard about soft law and hard law. The Convention on Biological Diversity still remains at a soft stage of development because there is no mechanism in the convention to ensure that member countries put in place national policies in law in order to implement the provisions in the convention. There is also the danger that World Trade Organization, through TRIPS and other trade-related agreements and institutions, will have an overriding effect or overwhelming effect on Convention on Biological Diversity and the national lawmaking space on biological resources. There is definitely a need for a creative reinterpretation of biodiversity rights. We need a more equitable mix of rights pertaining to biodiversity, human rights, and development. Of course, in your discussions in the coming technical sessions, I'm sure that you will also examine the problems associated with agricultural biodiversity, which is particularly relevant as far as India is concerned. Now, unfortunately, Indian agricultural sector has been opened up to international trade as dictated by World Trade Organization. This has meant, among other things, reorientation of cropping patterns for export markets, entry of global corporations in the seed, food processing, and packaging sectors, industrialization of agriculture with the introduction of potentially hazardous technologies such as genetic engineering. The new threats to biodiversity ushered in by changes in international law pose problems in the interface of international law and national law. Since you have included global strategies as one of the themes of this seminar, I'm mentioning this. It is also relevant to examine, discuss the political dimension of this crisis. Any crisis of biodiversity is also a crisis of democracy. Why? Because a government which is not truly democratic may only aggravate what is perpetrated by corporate dominance of free market. If World Bank, International Monetary Fund, and World Trade Organization are to determine which model of development a country is to pursue, it leaves very little space for the exercise of democracy. How and where do we exercise our right to decision making, democratic decision making? Many developing countries like India are rich in biological resources. And the possibility of biopiracy, not the possibility, but the reality of biopiracy, poses a threat to countries like India. In maintaining our traditional lifestyles that nurture the knowledge that keeps alive. And it is necessary to realize the ideal of human freedom. Even the ideal of human freedom may be gradually lost, diluted and lost. The principle of the right to development, especially sustainable development, also involves the right to participation. Unless there is right to participation, there is no right to development. And the very idea of democracy is gradually lost. The realization of rights is essential for the realization of justice. How do we do that is the key theme that repeatedly occurs in the course of this international seminar. It is often said that the right questions only will invite the right answers. It is very, very important to raise the right questions, because then only we can find out the right answers. Let me hope and wish that this international seminar on conservation biodiversity will be able to raise the right questions, especially the youngsters who are a part of this seminar will definitely raise the right questions. And the senior academics who are here to guide our deliberations will come out with the right answers. Let me once again thank the organizers for giving me this great opportunity to inaugurate the seminar and interact with the participants. Thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Furthermore, we are privileged to be joined by the distinguished Dr. Stephanie Rolfing-de Joux, who has held the position of professor at the University of Paris-Nanterre since 2008. Dr. Rolfing-de Joux earned her doctorate in German law from the University of Frankfurt am Main and her doctorate in private law from the University of Paris-Sorbonne. Additionally, she also plays a very pivotal role in overseeing the German-French doctoral program in collaboration between the universities of Paris-Nanterre and Potsdam. It is truly an honor and a privilege to invite Dr. Stephanie to deliver the keynote address to this event. Ma'am, please.
Thank you very much. Do you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, yes.
Yes, okay, perfect. So thank you first to all of you, the organizers, for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to speak to you today from maybe a part of view different from the Indian viewpoint. So as you told, thank you very much for the presentation. I'm professor in France, in Paris, and I work a lot with Germany. So it is more a point of view from Europe, but I will try to go to see the biodiversity in your region, and I will try to focus on the Indian Ocean region and to talk about biodiversity in the oceans, and especially in this region in the Indian Ocean. Also, I will try to to be quite quick, because I see you are already late in the program, so I try to not to be too long. So in introduction, I would like to tell you the maintain of the biodiversity is, of course, a very big issue, and it's very difficult to talk about it in some minutes. So I will just see some points of it. So the maintenance of biodiversity against the consequences of climate change, because of course it is the preservation of biodiversity is linked to the climate change problems. And this is one of the greatest challenges of the 21st century worldwide. No region and no country is spared of it. In the summer 2023, record temperatures were again recorded in the Northern Hemisphere, with heavy consequences such as losses of nature due to drought and huge forest fires. Natural disasters are on the increase all over the world. We hear every day from a new floating catastrophe now in Libya, in Morocco, earthquake. We have everywhere this kind of catastrophes that are very bad for the biodiversity, of course, because flora and fauna is killed by this natural disasters. So the fight against the consequences and against climate change itself is also the heart of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. In particular, the goal number 13 is especially devoted to combating climate change, and the goal 14 is devoted to the aquatic life and the blue economy, which are extremely affected by climate change. On 8 June each year, we are celebrating the World Day of the Oceans. In this day, in 2023, so this year, the High Sea Treaty on the Marine Biodiversity, also called the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Treaty, has been formalized and adopted on the 19th June by the United Nations. The treaty has already been signed by more than 70 nations, and also by the European Union. It has been accepted in principle also by India. It is now to be ratified by the other national states. This treaty aims to protect at least 2/3, or more than 30% of the ocean surface in the world. Combating climate change in order to fight for maintain of biodiversity is a global challenge that requires coordinated international cooperation. But some regions of the world are more affected by the consequences of climate change than others. This is the case for small island states and coastal regions such as Kerala. They are vulnerable because of, if it's the case of the islands, of their small size, and they are particularly prone to flooding, coastal erosion, and rising sea levels. As a result, these countries are very aware of the measures being put in place to combat climate change. For this reason, all member countries of the Indian Ocean Commission, all island states, have initiated the implementation of a climate change policy, a sustainable development policy, and measures to promote a blue economy. However, the levels and types of measures vary significantly from country to country. In order to harmonize this policy, regional coordination of the measures undertaken by each of the islands in the Indian Ocean appears to be essential for the effective implementation of climate change policies by the different Indian Ocean states. For the time being, there's only little consultation between the different actors and countries involved in the system. The system could be made more effective through regional cooperation, not only of the island states in the Indian Ocean, but also of India and the African states bordering the East Coast. However, there are already many organizations and institutions, associations for sustainable development and the fight against climate change, as well as numerous aids or support programs. The field is very wide and only a short overview of existing measures and cooperations can be depicted. So what is concerning the environment and biodiversity and the blue economy? The biodiversity in the Indian Ocean is one of the most important in the world. 30% of the world's population lives in Indian Ocean states, and 30% of the world's coral reefs are also located in this region. The small island states of the region contribute particularly much to this biodiversity. Most have a lot of coastal area in relation to the total area of the country and are surrounded by vast coral reefs. However, the special geographical situation, between the Indian subcontinent in the north and Africa in the east brings also with it special climatic conditions that have a strong influence of the development of biodiversity. Therefore, it needs special protection. The Sustainable Development Goal target 14.5, conserving coastal and marine areas, commits countries to conserving at least 10% of their marine coastal areas. But of course, this is not enough, and the Deep Sea Treaty goes further here. Blue economy is a long-term strategy that focuses on the sustainable use of ocean resources, including all economic activities such as fishing, marine transport, and port activity, use of seabed, tourism, and energy. The aim is to preserve the ocean ecosystem, aquaculture, health of the sea wildlife, and to protect the sea and the coastal areas against pollution and against overuse. Furthermore, the exploitation of mineral resources is just as problematic, although negotiations took place in March 2023 with the International Seabed Authority to regulate deep sea mining through a mining code. No agreement was reached, which bodes very poorly for protection of international waters. So this remains a non-law area. The resources at sea are the hydrothermal vents in which manganese, copper, iron, nickel, cobalt, gold, and silver flow, and which are full of rare genetic resources, but increasingly prized by the biotechnology and pharmaceutical industries. Thus, the ocean floor and its subsoil soil form a zone which is legally the common heritage of humanity. So it has to be deeply protected. The regional action plan on the blue economy concerning tourism, fishing, etc. has the aim for conservation of resources in collaboration with the Indian Ocean Rim Association. One important aspect of the blue economy are the marine transport. Small island states are dependent on importations and need to be connected to international commerce by marine transport. For this, the Article 2.2 of the Kyoto Protocol has delegated to the International Marine Organization to adopt measures to limit emissions in international marine transport. Marine transport is included with some special provisions in the Kyoto Protocol. The International Marine Organization has in 2018 enacted an initial strategy on reduction of gashouse emissions from ships that plan to reduce the emissions with short, mid, and long-term operational measures until 2030 and over. Yes, the international and regional, I will talk briefly about international and regional organizations for the protection of biodiversity and fight against climate change. So the countries of the Ocean Indian Zone belong to separate groupings and organizations. There's the COMESA and the SADC for cooperation with African states. But in the fight against climate change, the Indian Ocean Commission seems to be the most important. This diversity of institutions reflects, on one hand, a desire to strengthen collaboration and links between states, but it is also, on the other hand, a source of complexity, and the distribution of competences lacks coherence. The Indian Ocean Commission was created in January 1984, and it was institutionalized by the Victoria Agreement. It had its headquarters in Mauritius, and the member states are the Indian Ocean island states such as Seychelles, Mauritius, Madagascar, Comore, and Réunion Island. The Commission was reformed in March 2020 when the member states signed an agreement revising the General Agreement on Cooperation, expanding the mission of the Indian Ocean Commission and modernizing the regional cooperation, especially in face of environmental problems. The revising agreement has granted also the observer status to Japan, India, and the United Nations. China and the European Union had already an observer status before, but India was now since 2020 has an observer status in the Indian Ocean Commission. The role that the European Union plays is also a big one. France, through the presence of two overseas departments, Réunion and Mayotte, so two islands in the Indian Ocean, is heavily involved also in the climate change and biodiversity programs in the region of the Indian Ocean. The programs managed by the French Development Agency bear witness to France's interest and involvement in this field. There's also a strong cooperation with the European Union, which has an ambassador located in Mauritius, but responsible also for the Seychelles. The EU-founded programs are managed by this EU post in the Indian Ocean. Often there's a co-financing for the different programs. The presence of the European Union in the region can be seen as an advantage, as there's a strong financial investment as well. The European Union now has a specific competence in the field of environmental protection and sustainable development in the treaty of functioning of the European Union. One of the other important factors on biodiversity and climate change, of course, is closely linked to the meteorological factor. That's why the weather forecast programs are an integrated part to fight against the climate change. So I will just briefly tell two of them. The Aladdin program is a global weather model for drought forecasting and seed adaptation. So with climate simulations, they can predict also expected impacts. And the other one is a BRIO program. It is called Building Resilience in the Indian Ocean. It's a special climate model for the region of the Indian Ocean. And the BRIO project aimed to develop climate projections until up to the year 2100, so 2100. It is developed especially for the region, and it foresees also the training of experts in different countries of the zone, the elaboration of climate products, and so on. I will very shortly go on this very technical part. Then we have also the platform of intervention, of regional intervention in the Indian Ocean, ruled by the French Red Cross. It is a platform running a large disaster risk management program with International Red Cross collaboration. And the aim is to train the population on what to do in a flooded environment in order to better understand the dangers associated with floods, one of the most frequent natural risk linked to the climate change in the region. Then I will come to my conclusion, and I will give maybe some proposals to improve the regional cooperation in order to have better protection of biodiversity and a more efficient fight against climate change. So it is a scope of regional cooperation. The fight against climate change and the maintain of biodiversity is a global treat that required also a global response. For this reason, the integration of coastal African states and India into regional cooperation is necessary to create an Indian Ocean geographical area. It could be an attempt to solve cross-border problems through international conventions and regional agreements. In view of globalization, it can be assumed that problems cannot longer be solved locally or regionally. In international neighboring law, it is recognized that with regard to transboundary and environmental pollution, states do not enjoy unlimited freedom of their territory. For example, overfishing, marine pollution, exploitation of the seabed, etc. Each state may not take measures on its territories that could potentially harm neighboring states by causing environmental damage. However, this requires greater cooperation between neighbor states. Under the umbrella of international conventions, regionally specific solutions can also be developed. The parallelism and compatibility of local, regional, and national and international rights must be developed. The interaction of organization and the shifted levels appear to be particularly important. Comparative law thereby looks for good practices that can be transferred. Reference to one best practice can also be very useful. Programs against climate change can only show long-term effects. The phenomenon is already so far advanced that it's impossible to reverse the trend in a short time. Therefore, programs should also have a longer duration than just a few years to be able to produce significant effects. There's a need to extend sensitively the duration of programs supporting sustainable development. The planned duration of most programs is too short to allow for long-term improvement. The number of different programs and different partners is very high. Without effective coordination of these programs, both the financial and personal input will evaporate like a drop of water in the ocean. With effective coordination on the different programs, the impact could be significantly increased. At the same time, there aren't too many and not too enough stakeholders in the field of climate change. Almost every program has its own program management committee or office. This multiple stakeholders disperses competences and dilute resources. However, there's no organization or office competent for the whole region of the Indian Ocean, including India and African countries, but limited to the Eastern Indian region and subject of climate change. One possibility could be establish one regional coordination center and one liaison office per state. The various arrangements should be coordinated by a regional coordination office and possibly with the support of the liaison office in each state of the region. The Indian Ocean Commission has a geographical too limited intervention region to be enough effective. The cooperation with India and African states is indispensable. But for this, a political action is necessary. Thank you very much. I know that these propositions are very ambitious and maybe not realizable in a short time, but I think we should go for this international cooperation, including such big countries like India and African countries. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for gracing us with your insights.
Today, we are truly fortunate to have with us the distinguished Srimati Bhagya Dilrukshi Vikramasinghe. She is an accomplished attorney at law, currently practicing at the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka, and she also
She is an accomplished attorney at law, currently practicing at the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka, and she also serves as a legal advisor to the Sri Lankan government. Her extensive expertise encompasses a broad spectrum of legal domains, including civil and criminal law, litigation, drafting of pleadings, arbitration, IT law, and numerous other facets of legal profession. I'm sincerely honored to invite Srimati Bhagya Dilrikshi ma'am for the special address to this event. Ma'am, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the organizers for organizing this very timely and very relevant event. And also to the distinguished speakers who spoke very articulately and who pointed out different aspects of biodiversity conservation from how it started as a concept and how it is now entered into the mainstream legal framework of the international and domestic legal systems, and setting the stage actually for my speech. So I would like to start my speech by pointing out, we all know the importance of biodiversity in terms of protecting the plants, animals, and providing human well-being, providing us with the essentials that we require to survive. But I would like to start my speech with the very alarming fact about biodiversity hotspots. According to the Red List, which identifies biodiversity hotspots, they have listed that South Asian region has 3 biodiversity hotspots. And that is alarming because unlike what we think about hotspots, being a biodiversity hotspot is actually not a positive fact. It is a very problematic issue because it identifies that in South Asian region, there are 3 areas which have been identified as having biodiversity degradation and threatened species and not having adequate protection. And that actually points us towards the importance of regional mechanisms and why the South Asian region should take biodiversity conservation more effectively and as more seriously. And towards this end, there has been certain movements like the Marine and Coastal Biodiversity Strategy for the South Asian region, Regional Seas Program, Living in Harmony with Our Oceans and Coasts, which was published by the United Nations Environment Program and the South Asia Cooperative Environment Program. But unlike the other regions, as the previous speakers mentioned, the South Asian region has not been able to coordinate its efforts and collaborate effectively in terms of setting up legal, implementation, and enforcement mechanisms. I will come to that point a little bit later. I will go back to the problem with biodiversity hotspots and why we should be concerned and why we should be taking biodiversity conservation more seriously. So actually biodiversity conservation is important for our survival, human well-being, and for the resilience to ensure that the environment and the humans can coexist and live in harmony in nature. And for this extent, we need to identify the ecosystem services. So the biodiversity is actually one of the main services, or one of the main importance of biodiversity is that it provides ecosystem services such as pollination, water purification, and climate regulation, which is why the UNFCCC and biodiversity conservation, the Convention of Biodiversity Conservation, is actually integrally linked. And this is also why the United Nations Environment Program is also interlinking with biodiversity conservation and effecting programs to conserve biodiversity. In addition, in South Asia, we have specific biodiversity problems such as protection of habitats and habitat fragmentation. And one of the problems in South Asian region is, like most our conservation efforts and most our protection efforts, in certain instances, the biodiversity conservation efforts have fact and data driven. One of the examples I can take from Sri Lanka is in terms of identifying what are the priority areas and what are the areas that should be protected. But actually, when Sri Lanka's protected area network was identified, we have not really studied what are the biodiversity sensitive areas, or what are the areas with more biodiversity, to identify and protect those areas and demarcate those areas as protected areas. Therefore, we are at a crisis in terms of how we connect these protected areas with the biodiversity sensitive areas. So likewise, there are other problems linked to protection of habitats and identifying forests, wetlands, coastal reefs, and establishment of protected areas through a data-driven, evidence-based approach. So this is why science and law needs to go together in establishing biodiversity protection regulations and laws to ensure that the legal decision-making or policy-making is based on scientific evidence. And that is absolute, for that purpose, it's absolutely important to ensure that there is regional cooperation, and also in there's scientific and legal cooperation between the two fields. Which is why we have to identify as lawyers, when we study as law students, researchers, we also have to pay attention to what the scientists say. So if we are interested in addressing climate change, biodiversity related problems more seriously, and identifying practical, implementable and effective measures, we have to ensure that these approaches are backed by science. Another problem is overexploitation, because of the population of the Asian region, and also because of the fact that the Asian region is mainly driven by agriculture, fisheries, and other natural resource-based livelihoods. There is an overexploitation of these natural resources. And in order to address this, it is important to address and promote sustainable consumption and production practices, and to identify alternative income sources for local communities, and to make the local communities a part of biodiversity and environment protection. And to this end, we have identified approaches like community forests, where we can ensure that the community itself takes the responsibility for protection of forests and the environment. The other main problem is something that the Asian region we talk about quite often, where Asian region is doubly vulnerable to climate change. So as a doubly vulnerable region to climate change, mitigation of climate change also, at the end of the day, climate change impacts also affect the biodiversity. So in order to address and conserve biodiversity, we will also have to take seriously mitigation measures to address climate change and its effects. This again leads to the importance of ensuring that our efforts in biodiversity conservation is not individual and isolated. We cannot have biodiversity conservation efforts in isolation, and we have to link up to the international frameworks that are established, such as the Convention on Biodiversity, and address and ensure that we have regional cooperation. And that regional cooperation can take measures like scientific cooperation, technological cooperation, and financial cooperation. Moving on to the recent developments in biodiversity conservation law, as we all know, there was an important convention recently, important meeting recently in 2022 December in Kunming, where the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework was established. And this is actually one of the frameworks that have identified the importance of most of these things that I've been talking about. The importance of regional, domestic, and sub-regional level cooperation, and also the importance of setting up long-term impacts, long-term approaches towards biodiversity conservation. Another aspect that has been actually stressed by this Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework is the importance of mobilizing groups like the local community, the international and non-governmental organizations, women's groups, business and finance community, and scientific community and academia. and faith-based organizations to represent the sectors, make sure that the biodiversity conservation efforts they run through the sectors, and that we have cooperation among all the actors involved. And that actually brings me back to one of the important areas of legal framework that I want to highlight before I end my speech. That is the importance of making sure that the government is no longer the locus of enforcement in terms of biodiversity conservation laws. We need to identify the polluter pays principle and make the polluters and the community, individuals and the industry, the business community, actually part and parcel of these enforcement efforts. So it should be not the regulations and the laws that we make. It should not just highlight the government responsibility, because we have identified that the government itself alone does not have the necessary technical information, scientific technical capacities to handle biodiversity conservation and biodiversity issues that we face. And that is why in certain instances, we will have to rely on things like approaches such as self-regulation and identify multi-sectoral and cross-cutting liability in terms of not just the government being responsible and liable towards protection of environment and conservation of biodiversity, but to have the community, the industries responsible for biodiversity conservation. So I thought that I will highlight these few points in order to make sure, and in order to give an introduction and sort of set the stage to the technical themes and technical events that will follow. And I want to thank the organizers again for actually organizing such an important thematic event, because it is absolutely important that the academia recognizes the importance of awareness creation and identifying the multidisciplinary nature of this subject, biodiversity conservation. And the more we talk about it, the more we discuss this, it opens our minds to the issues, the problems, and the approaches that we can adopt as the legal community. And we also have to identify that the legal community alone cannot find the answers to these issues such as biodiversity conservation and climate change. The problem identification itself comes from the scientific community, and the legal approaches and enforcement mechanisms are just one part of conservation. The other part of conservation comes from the scientific community, and which is why we have to ensure that truly addressing biodiversity conservation should be a more cooperative and a more inclusive effort, where we include all the communities and the different multidisciplinary sectors. Thank you very much, and wish you all a very successful event.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your valuable insights and wisdom. As Dalai Lama wisely said, the roots of all goodness lie in the soil of appreciation for goodness. With that in mind, I warmly welcome Srimati Darshana S. Thampi, a research scholar, to deliver the vote of thanks for this inaugural session.
Thank you, Hanan. As we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to love by them. These were words said by former US President John F. Kennedy. A very warm morning to one and all. Respected dignitaries, faculty members, volunteers, students, and my dear participants. It is my privilege to be enshrined with the duty to extending the gratitude to all those who made this event to reach its epitome success. I consider it as an absolute privilege to present a vote of thanks to the dignitaries of today's inaugural session of 17th International Seminar on Biodiversity Conservation, Global Strategies and Legal Scenarios, organized by Kerala Law Academy Law College in association with Center for Advanced Legal Studies and Research and KLA Center for Environmental Science and Law and IQAC KLA. I would first like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the late Dr. N. Narayanan Nair, founder, Kerala Law Academy, who always remains as an inspiration for us in conducting these events. We have been listening the most informative and fruitful speech delivered by Dr. N.K. Jayagumar sir, former Vice Chancellor, NUALS, Kochi. Sir, we highly appreciate your readiness to accept our invitation and are indebted to you
for giving us a part of your valuable time. On behalf of Kerala Law Academy, I propose a heartfelt vote of thanks to you, sir. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Professor Dr. Bismi Gopalakrishnan, Professor of Law and Director of Research, Mahatma Gandhi University, for enlightening us with such an informative address and giving us a part of your valuable time. On behalf of Kerala Law Academy Law College, I propose a heartfelt vote of thanks to you, ma'am. I would also like to extend my gratitude to Dr. Stephanie Roffling-Dijo, Professor, University of Paris Nanterre, for providing us such an enlightening speech and giving us a part of your precious time. On behalf of Kerala Law Academy and on my own behalf, I propose a heartfelt vote of thanks to you, ma'am. I would like to extend my gratitude to Srimati Bhagya Dulrishi Vikramasinghe, Attorney at Law, Supreme Court of Sri Lanka, Faculty of Postgraduate Studies, University of Colombo, Technical Specialist, Support to Justice Sector Project UNDP, for providing us a fruitful talk. We all found it extremely informative and enlightening. On behalf of Kerala Law Academy, teachers, students, non-teaching staff, and on my own behalf, I propose a heartfelt vote of thanks to you, ma'am. Now I extend my deepest and sincere gratitude to Dr. Dakshina Saraswati, ma'am, Assistant Professor, Kerala Law Academy, delivered the welcome address, who has been our pillar of strength, and for her unending constant support in making the seminar reality. With the utmost respect, I would like to extend my vote of thanks to Advocate Nagaraj Narayan sir, Director of Kerala Law Academy, Advocate, High Court of Kerala, Chairman of Kerala Law Academy Moot Court Society, Member, Bar Council of Kerala. He was always supported every activity in the college and has encouraged us to do our best. We are indebted to you, sir, for being our pillar of strength and giving us courage. With deep sense of respect, I thank you, sir, for your hard work and effort. I take this opportunity to thank Professor Alkumar K, sir, Director, Administration, Student and Faculty Affairs, Kerala Law Academy Law College. He is a brilliant academician with years of experience in the field of legal education. I express my genuine vote of thanks to you, sir. Professor Harindran K, our principal, is always a source of inspiration to all the academic activities in this college. He always extends his support and guidance to all the competitions, conferences, international seminars, workshops organized in this college. On behalf of Kerala Law Academy, teachers, students, and non-teaching members, and on my own behalf, I propose a sincere thanks to Sri Harindran sir from the bottom of my heart. I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to Professor Alkumar G sir, Vice Principal, Kerala Law Academy, for his tireless efforts in making this event reach its epitome. I would also like to extend my heartfelt thanks to Professor Dr. Ajita Nair LMAM, Senior Faculty, KLA, who has expertise over 20 years in this legal arena. On behalf of Kerala Law Academy, I would like to express my sincere thanks to our faculty conveners, Srimati Prajita PG Ma'am, Assistant Professor KLA, and Srimati Varsha G Nair Ma'am, Assistant Professor KLA. Finally, I would like to express my sincere thanks to our IT team, who has provided with the technical support, which is significant due to the virtual nature of this event. Now, I conclude by extending my sincere thanks to all the parents, students, teachers, non-teaching staffs, and all those who were present here to make this function a grand success. Thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am, for your warm appreciation. Your words are truly heartening, and I do convey my heartfelt thanks to you, ma'am.
And now, as we approach the end of this inaugural session, on behalf of Kerala Law Academy Law College, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to all of you for joining us and staying with us throughout this session. And now, I extend my gratitude to Advocate Nagaraj Narayanan sir, Director, Kerala Law Academy Law College, who has wholeheartedly supported us throughout this journey. I would also like to extend my sincere gratitude to Professor Anil Kumar Kesa, Director Administration, Students and Faculty Affairs, who is the mastermind behind all the events conducted by Kerala Law Academy and a core supporter. Professor Harindran Kesa, the Principal, Kerala Law Academy Law College. Professor Anil Kumar Jisa, Vice Principal, Kerala Law Academy Law College. Professor Dr. Ajita Nair L. Ma'am, Senior Faculty, Kerala Law Academy Law College. Srimati Darshana S. Thampi Ma'am, Research Scholar. Dr. Dakshana Saraswati Ma'am, Srimati Prajita PG Ma'am, and Srimati Varsha G. Nair Ma'am, Assistant Professors, Kerala Law Academy, and our high-spirited student conveners, dedicated technical and non-technical staff who have put in unwavering effort to ensure the resounding success of this event.
With that, we've reached the end of this session. I'm Hanan.
And I'm Gauri Jyotish.
Your student moderators here to say goodbye. Thank you all and have a wonderful day ahead.